You're listening to the Law Lives Project. I'm your host, Angie Vishianan. I'm a lawyer that launched a startup focused on changing the legal profession through mentorship. Through this podcast, we will explore the early career steps of real lawyers to help students see that many of us didn't have it all figured out at first. It takes time to find your way in the profession, so we want to shed light on some of the challenges people face in the earliest part of building their careers. Each week, I sit down with members of the legal profession and chat with them about the paths they took to get where they are now, including the times they stumbled, the times they fell, and the times they needed a little help. To encourage candor and vulnerability on this show, the attorney guests will remain nameless, but their stories will be laid bare for your consideration. This episode is sponsored by the Princeton Review. For more than 35 years, students and their families have trusted the Princeton Review to help them get into their dream schools. Their mission is to provide personalized, innovative, best-in-class private tutoring, test prep, and admission products and services to help students knock down barriers and achieve their academic goals. They are solely on the side of the students. They are not affiliated with any of the test developers. When it comes to your future, they'll cover you every step of the way. With score guarantee courses, private one-on-one tutoring, webinars, and support articles, you'll never lack the tools you need. Check them out at www.review.com or call 800-2-REVIEW. That's 800-273-8439. And save 20% on your course enrollment with promo code TPRLLP. Hi everyone! We are so excited to kick off Season 2 of the Law Lives Project. Our very first guest of the season is an attorney who has truly charted her own path focused on sports and entertainment law. She managed to snag several sports-related internships in law school, despite struggling with her own personal challenges. Early on in her career, she realized the importance of finding an employer that shares her values, so she spent lots of time exploring different roles to design a career that truly aligns with her passions and beliefs. I can't wait to share her story with you, so let's jump right in. Tell me, how did you decide you wanted to go to law school?
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. For me, I was a first-generation law school attendee. And for me, I went to undergrad at a pretty prominent state school and was offered a position to go to London to be a marketer. And I decided instead that I was going to go to law school because I wanted to work in sports as a sports agent. I ended up getting into law school, a bunch of different law schools, actually, even though my LSAT was really low. I got into a bunch of different law schools and actually got scholarships to a lot of them. And then I used the scholarship from one school and I made a table that had all the different scholarships and the percentage of total tuition. And I kind of made this like business spreadsheet based upon, my background in business from undergrad. And I sent it to the different schools and I said, can anyone give me more money? And all of them came back and they were like, yeah, we can. And I said, okay, fantastic. This school's giving me 40%. This school's giving me 30. Can you up it? And so I finally decided to pick the school that didn't give me the most money, but that I felt like was the best cultural fit for me. They had professors who would stay up until 2 a.m. on the phone with you, talking to you about questions you might have had on the material or helping you calm down if you were getting ready for a test. Their doors were always open.
Around what age were you when you decided you wanted to go to law school? Were you still coming straight out of undergrad or did you work in between?
So I was coming straight out of undergrad. I did work while I was in undergrad doing marketing and business, but I went to law school straight out of undergrad and decided not to take that job in London and go straight to law.
And when you first took the LSAT and you got the 154, did you try again?
I did not try again because I knew that my extracurriculars and my resume and my background would be good enough to get into the schools that I wanted to attend. And I have never been a phenomenal standardized test taker ever. I graduated second in my high school class. I graduated from undergrad cum laude, and I didn't even try that hard, if I'm being honest. I knew that everything else was going to bolster me and that my personal statement was going to be amazing. And so I didn't want to take it again because I knew that was probably the best I was going to get.
It sounds like you applied to a lot of law schools. Like, how did you even create this spreadsheet of how did you pick which ones you wanted to apply to? Did you get waivers? What sparked you applying to all these schools?
Yeah, so I got some waivers from some schools, and then I just kind of talked to people. I talked to people about, what schools they thought I would mesh well with. I looked up some schools that had great sports law programs because I knew I wanted to be in sports. And so schools like Marquette and a few other schools up in the north, Quinnipiac, I applied there as well. I applied to schools in Texas, applied to schools on East Coast, West Coast, North. I just applied a little bit everywhere to schools that I thought would kind of fit my personality, my background, and what I wanted to do. And then when they came back, I got one from a school up north that actually like hand wrote me a letter. It was like, "Thank you so much for applying. We'd love for you to come and study sports law here." And I was just blown away because I didn't have a good LSAT score, right? But I had such a good personal statement and my background was so unique that they really were interested in having me come there. I actually turned that down and went to a school in Texas because they gave me a good scholarship. And also, like I said before, they had such a great faculty that I knew that I was going to actually be cared about and appreciated for going to school there instead of going to like this huge school up north that I probably was just going to be a cog in the machine.
Let's talk about your unique background. So, you're first generation. Did you have any lawyers, even in your extended family or in your close circle? How did you start interacting with lawyers?
So I had attorneys in my extended family. So we had attorneys in the family on both my mother and my father's side, but I wasn't very close to them. And then in my circle, I didn't really have that many. But when I knew that I wanted to go to law school in undergrad, I actually went around to the city that I was in and tried to figure out, where I could do some type of quote unquote internship work or learn about the law. And so I actually got a position at a courthouse being an intern there. And the judge there, who was also an attorney, kind of took me under his wing and really talked to me about law school life, what it was like to go to law school, what being an attorney was like. And I actually got to help him with cases on his docket. So I was a law clerk for him. It was considered an internship, but I was more or less a law clerk. And I got to do a lot. And it was really cool because I saw that he truly cared about the people that he was working with, but also the people that came into his courtroom.
That's wonderful experience that you were able to work for a judge, gosh, before law school. That's really rare. What law school did you ultimately decide to go to, and what was like the biggest deciding factor for you?
I ended up going to Texas Wesleyan University in Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is now Texas A&M University. So it transitioned after my first year and was purchased by Texas A&M. We had really phenomenal professors at Wesleyan, now A&M. And for me, I was a double Aggie. And so it was interesting because I went to undergrad at A&M, and A&M has very strict core values. An Aggie doesn't lie, cheat, or steal or tolerate those who do. And so for me, I felt like Wesleyan had that same philosophy. And it's actually mind-boggling that A&M saw that and bought it as well, because they're like, "Oh, you guys have a very similar culture and set of values that we do. We'd love to purchase you, infuse money into it, and continue these values." For me, it just was a seamless transition from the selfless service, the ethical background and nature that A&M has, to going to law school. And it was so different than a lot of my peers who went to other universities, undergrad and then law schools within Texas and in other states. They didn't have that camaraderie.
If you could have picked a different law school, would you have?
I wouldn't have picked a different school. If this wasn't an option, if A&M hadn't been an option or Wesleyan hadn't been an option, then I probably would have went to Marquette, just because Marquette has a phenomenal sports law program. And a lot of my now mentors really hyped Marquette's law school, but I wouldn't have changed my decision. I just love the culture. And I loved what I learned. And I loved that I felt like I was cared about and appreciated at this school. People were never taking books and hiding them. People were never cutting out pages. In law school, you need every single tiny ounce of mental health that you can have. And if your
Mhm.
school is not does not care about that, then if you have any type of anxiety or depression at all, it's going to just absolutely flare up and go psychotic. At my school,
Yeah.
we had breakfasts and they would provide coffee and food and counseling and like all these happy hours. They did free study sessions for the bar exam that you could go to that were taught by our professors. You didn't even have to sign up for the class. They just did this bar prep for you. And then they did like after hours, fun, happy hour study for the bar. I mean, literally amazing. And they made you take classes that were going to be on the bar exam.
Do you think your school prepared you well for the practice area you were interested in?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a niche area. So sports law is a little different, right? So it's more difficult to prepare for that because there aren't a ton of classes. But my school offered, like Title IX classes. It offered sports law. It offered contract drafting, arbitration, negotiation, alternative dispute classes. There was actually a certificate in alternative dispute. They prepared me well, but I still had to do my own work, right? I still had to find my own internships because my school really hadn't had anybody that was extremely interested in sports law. So they really didn't know where to look, but my professors did. Professor Denny, he was our sports law professor. He was an adjunct there, and he's a very successful sports attorney in the United States. And he really helped me a lot with figuring out where to apply, how to get internships, where I could look for jobs.
Did you get to participate in any extracurricular activities while you were in school that you thought were really valuable for your career?
Yes, so I did a lot of negotiation competitions in law school, and those really just helped me in general with understanding how to speak to interviewers, how to go into an organization and say, you don't have a job, but I want one, and this is why you should hire me.
I know you mentioned that you were interested in sports, but there weren't that many classes in sports. But yet you mentioned a litany of other classes that you thought were applicable to sports. And I thought that was really interesting because I wouldn't think that all of those would be applicable to sports law. So can you hone in on that just a little bit more?
Yes. So if you're doing in house work, which is what most sports positions are going to be, unless you work for a law firm that has a sports department or something, most of these jobs are going to be with leagues and teams, and they're going to be in house positions. In house is a little bit of everything. And so if I wanted to work for the NBA at their league offices or for an NBA franchise, I need to understand about their arena, which could be real estate, right? Leasing, transactional work, vendor agreements. I need to understand about their players, which is employment law, immigration law. I need to understand about sexual harassment. I need to understand about HR issues. So, employment law is really important. And then, if I'm going to be negotiating sponsorship agreements, player agreements, things like that, then I need to understand alternative dispute resolution. What are the arbitration provisions in the collective bargaining agreement? What are the negotiation and mediation tactics that I can use when I'm talking to these people? So there are a ton of classes that aren't necessarily labeled sports law that can be extremely helpful.
Fascinating. I had no idea. Honestly, that's amazing. What jobs and internships or activities did you do between your summer, between 1L year and 2L year?
So I thought I wanted to be a sports agent. So I reached out to sports agencies. I reached out to just my network in general. My father is a jack of all trades. He knows literally everybody. So he was like, oh, I'll ask somebody, and somebody will know somebody that's a sports agent. And so he asked some people, and they were like, yeah, we know this guy. He's an NFL agent, and he'd be more than happy to teach you his craft. I interned with him, and I realized that a lot of people weren't as ethical as he was. And I knew that I didn't want to be in sports agency because there was just a lot of underhanded dealing. And I did, I think, a year or so with him and realized I didn't want to do agency. And so I started talking to other attorneys. What can I do in sports? And like, oh, well, you can work for a team, or you can work for a league, or you can work in a law firm in their sports department, right? And then I talked to my sports law professor and I said, I do not want to be an agent. What else can I do? And he said, NCAA compliance department. I know people at SMU's NCAA compliance and at TCU. And so I was like, okay. So SMU said to me, we'd love to have you be an intern and you need to get some credit. And that lasted for about a year as well.
So did you do these in lieu of summer opportunities? Like, did you just stay with these throughout?
Yes. So I stayed with these because a lot of them I was able to do, some of the work I was able to do kind of online. So with the sports agent, I didn't have to kind of like be in an office with him. I was able to go to football games and scout players and write up reports and get him information on players that I knew personally to see if they would have a meeting with him, things like that. And then with the NCAA compliance, that was much more like 2, 3 times a week. I went into the office and did my internship there, but I didn't ever have a position in the summer where I like was getting paid like that internship salary, like people at Baker Botts who are getting like a crazy amount per month to like do a summer internship or they're getting money. No, I didn't get paid ever.
A lot of law students search for summer jobs on very different criteria. Some people really, really do just want the experience. Other people really, really do just want the paycheck. And I've never been a person that could afford to not work either, but I like also realize the importance of obtaining just experience, right? So getting your foot in the door. So I took a ton of unpaid things. I remember how hard that was. So I really admire the fact that you were trying to find really relevant experience for yourself, even if it wasn't what everyone else was doing. I mean, that's sometimes the hardest part about law school. Were you ever caught up in that game of what everyone else is doing?
I would get a little flustered when I heard what some people were making monthly at their law
Right.
firm positions. But at the end of the day, I knew I didn't want to do that. So it wasn't like I couldn't compare myself to someone that was doing a position that I had no desire to do. You know, that that's just setting yourself up for failure. I mean, comparison is the thief of joy. So I wasn't going to compare myself to anyone but me. So I didn't have that concern that, oh my gosh, these people are on this path and like this is the successful path. I'm like, well, sure, it's the successful path for them. I have no desire to go to the end goal that they're achieving to win. I don't want that. So it's going to be a failure for me even if I do what they're doing because I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you discover what you really want for yourself and you explore different options for careers and really decide for yourself. But so many students don't take the time to do that. So they really have no idea what they want to do and they just end up chasing every shiny object while everybody else is chasing it. What internships or jobs or activities did you do between 2L and 3L year?
Yeah, so I kind of, and this is just me being a multi-potentialite. So I do a lot of things at the same time. So the NCAA and the agency, I didn't do them at the same time, but they were like one right after the other. So I started the agency job kind of during my 1L year, and then I started the NCAA job kind of during my 2L year, and then my 2L summer, I ended up going to Florida to do an internship with an NBA agent slash attorney who did sports law in his practice. And so I found that internship. It got approved by my school, and I actually went down to Florida for 3 months. I also learned a lot there because I recognized the differences between the NFL and the NFL's collective bargaining agreement and the NBA and the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, the differences in recruiting players, and the differences between the leagues.
Were there any other experiences or connections or factors that helped you get skills or inroads that you needed for your first post law school position?
So, my first official post law position, I actually received it because I was the chairwoman for the sports law symposium. And because of that, I met a ton of people that were in the sports industry and I kept in contact with all of them. And then this guy, he was the general counsel for a professional sports team and for a famous family. And he was like, you know what, Alex, we need some help. We need an attorney's help. And I know that you just graduated law school and we would love to pay you and have you come work for us. And I just was flabbergasted because you always hear about like networking can help you get a job. And it sounds like such BS. And so that's how I got my first job because I networked in school. I decided to take on some extra things on my plate that I knew I wanted to do, like literally creating a symposium from scratch. We did not have a symposium before that.
So you said that your professor really pushed you to do this symposium. Do you consider that professor a mentor of yours?
Oh, 100%. He is like my numero uno mentor. He is always helping me with everything all the time. And I'm always trying to, help and support him as best as I can. We still talk to this day. I talk to him like every week or so.
How did you cultivate that relationship with him?
I made sure that I was keeping in touch with him and I was doing everything I possibly could to help him on anything that he needed help with, right? So the sports law symposium, he's like, yeah, I think it'd be great if you guys did that. That'd be wonderful. And it was an amazing experience because he was essentially mentoring me by giving me these contacts. And I made sure that I did everything for him that I could do. If I saw a news article that I thought was important to his practice, I was analyzing it and sending it to him. I was looking at new legislation and trying to deconstruct it in a way where he could just read it quickly and understand what was going on. And so for me, it was like a two-way street. I wanted to make sure that the relationship I had wasn't one-sided.
Were there any other key challenges or setbacks that you had to overcome in law school?
Yes, I had a lot. And I'd always been an extremely healthy person. I was an athlete for most of my life. And when I was in my second year of law school, I was getting really sick a lot. And even if I had like one glass of wine, I would be very, very sick. And so my mom is in the medical field and she said, we need to see you. We need to get you to a doctor. And so they got me to a doctor, did a ton of tests. It took about 6 months. And so I was going through all these tests while I was in law school and they diagnosed me with a genetic liver disease, like a very rare one. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they told me, you're going to have to take this medicine. You're going to have to cut out all these foods. You can't drink anymore. Right. And so I was going through my second year of law school where, it's scare you to death your first year, work you to death your second year, and then bore you to death your third year. And I had jobs, I had internships, and now I was having to manage like in a completely new lifestyle change. And that was really tough. Right. But it kind of showed me that there are much bigger things in your life than your grades in law school. And it really was, I wouldn't say that it was a wonderful thing to happen to me, but it definitely took me out of the law school, like potential addiction cycle that people, like you hear about people in law school having, like they drink too much, they drink to cope with the pain, with the stress, they do drugs, they do all this stuff. And so for me, I was like, nope, not even going to touch a sip.
Even developing an addiction around work. Like, I think
Yeah.
law school cultivates an addiction to work. I mean, literally, like
Right.
it's crazy because it does amplify a lot of really negative traits
Yeah.
in people. And so that's great that you at least had an experience that kind of shocked you out of that.
Yeah. You don't have to drink alcohol in law school in order to network. You don't have to drink alcohol as an attorney in order to network. It's just, I'm a living, breathing proof of that. I don't drink alcohol at all. I haven't done that in like 7 or 8 years. I haven't touched a sip. And I'm perfectly capable of networking with everyone. And I'm sober when I do it. So I actually remember who I'm networking with and I don't make a fool of myself.
Yeah, I know you mentioned at least one other key experience that happened to you during law school. So can you tell me about that?
Yes. So one of my best friends in undergrad, she was also going to law school. She was a year behind me, and she actually passed away this summer before she was going to law school, which was my second year of law school. Yeah, and so she actually passed away in a car accident. And so for me, having to deal with that, it was the summer of my second year. Now I remember because I was commuting from Florida to Mississippi, where she was in intensive care, and I was doing that internship with.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so every weekend I was driving there in hopes that she would wake up from this coma that she was in, right? And she didn't. She ended up passing away, and it was very tough. It was like another reminder that there are so many more important things in your life than law school or grades.
This episode is sponsored by Crescendo. Crescendo helps law students crush finals, the MPRE, and the bar. With hundreds of mnemonics and illustrations, thousands of official NCBE practice questions, affordable pricing, lifetime access, whiteboard videos, plus audio outlines and audio flashcards, Crescendo is revolutionizing legal education. Unlike some competitors who require expensive deposits, Crescendo offers the opposite. A 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Most everyone sticks around. The 5-star reviews explain why you should try Crescendo. Matthew from Harvard said he wished he had Crescendo as a 1L. Visit crescendo.com to learn more. That's CRUSHENDO.com. Also, use promo code LawLives15 with no caps or spaces. That's LawLives15 to get 15% off on any of Crescendo's innovative bar prep material. And now, back to the episode.
The first position that I had coming out of law school, it was a project position. So I was a contract project attorney, I guess was the title. They didn't really give me a title. They're just like, come on in and work for us, right? And it was with a family, like a family business for a very prominent, like famous family. They had a bunch of different divisions of their company, and I was working in the oil and gas department with the possibility of helping with some of their sports law work. So I was looking at whether oil and gas assets were owned or sold, where they were located. I did a lot of filing of like mineral deeds, but I did get to lobby the Texas legislature on behalf of FC Dallas, the Mavs, the Dallas Cowboys to allow 50-50 sports betting in charitable sports betting in Texas. And that ultimately became law in the state of Texas. And so that was the one piece of sports I was able to touch pretty intensely. And it was kind of like what I wanted to do. I'm like, if I can get one sports law thing out of this oil and gas job, I will be so happy. And then I was able to successfully lobby the Texas legislature to pass this piece of legislation. And now you see 50-50 sports raffles in every major professional sports team in Texas.
What challenges or difficulties did you experience in that first job?
Having confidence in the fact that my opinion mattered. I had one of the head of accounting in that company say to me, well, those 3 guys in oil and gas are having a conversation in the office. You need to put yourself in there now. And I was like, well, I don't think I have anything. She said, go in there and sit down. And so it taught me that, if I see people that are within my department or whom I look up to and the door is open, I should just go in and I should say, hey, what are you guys talking about?
What position did you take after your first position, and what was that transition like?
So I left the project position because it had ended and they didn't have any more work for me and they weren't hiring anyone and I didn't have a job to go to. And so I wasn't too worried because I've always saved all the money that I make. Essentially, for me, the financial aspect really wasn't there because I had saved a ton of money. So I was like, okay, I have some time to just kind of like unwind and apply for jobs. And so I applied for some jobs and I got a call for this legal counsel position, but essentially it was associate general counsel position, but it was titled legal counsel. And so I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And it was at a multinational private company. And I said, that's amazing. I want to work at an international company. I want to understand how that works to have headquarters in the United States and in another country. And so I transitioned into that position. And the day that I started that job, the head attorney who had been telling me that he was going to mentor me and the attorney below him was going to mentor me and I was going to have this amazing like mentoring experience and get to learn from these attorneys who are seasoned. He was like, actually, it's always been the case that I am going to leave and you are going to be the second attorney in charge.
Oh, no.
Yeah, literally the second that I accepted the position, they're like, yeah, we just didn't want to tell you. I'm like, well, you lied to me. So that's wonderful. And
That's not a good way to start off, right?
no. And so they were untruthful to me about that. And then they didn't increase my title nor my salary, even though I had just inherited like a whole nother position. And so as a young attorney, I should have seen that as a red flag and said, I can't accept this position. But you're always told like, you should be happy if you get a legal position. Like, okay, well, I should be happy I got a position, right? I'm just a grunt. I shouldn't ask for anything. I shouldn't assert myself, right? And now I know that that's not the case because actually at that position, after about a year or so of working there, I uncovered some really terrible fraud that had been happening. And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and I brought it to the attention of the head attorney and he was like, sure, we'll take care of it. And like nothing happened.
So then what did you do? Who did you talk to about that? I mean, gosh, these ethical concerns were huge. So as a junior attorney, if you go to your boss and they say, "Well, I'm a part of this and too bad so sad." What did you do?
Yes. So I went to my mentors and I went to the state bar ethics hotline and I talked through everything with both of them. I did the research to make sure that, in fact, I was correct that this type of behavior would be considered fraud in the inducement. And it was. And so I'm like, okay, yeah. And the state bar said to me, if you should, because they can't tell you, yes, this is, or no, this isn't, right? They can't give you legal advice. They're kind of like ethical therapists. And so they said, if you are getting this upset and stressed about this situation, don't you think that that tells you something about this situation? And it was the best piece of advice I got because I thought to myself, yeah, if I really am so stressed out about this because I believe that this is fraud in the inducement and I did the research and it's fraud in the inducement and I'm stressing about this, then it probably is exactly fraud in the inducement, right?
If it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out what to do. And so I talked to my mentor. I was like, okay, I'm going to try one more attempt within the company to get this sorted. And so my boss wasn't going to do anything about it. And he was the head attorney. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to the CEO. I've spoken to him before. It was a wonderful conversation. I said, but I have spoken to him before. He knows who I am. I set up a meeting with his secretary to talk to him. And then he calls my boss to like ask what this meeting is going to be about. And then he cancels the meeting. Like, well, guess it's time for me to mosey on out of here, right? And so I, typed up a resignation letter, which could have been much more professional, but I talked to my mentor and he was like, listen, you need to put in some of the reasoning why you're leaving.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but this makes me feel so uncomfortable. I don't want to put in here because of X, Y, and Z. And so I wrote out the resignation letter. I recently read it too. And I was like, oh, this makes me so stressed out.
Oh,
And I sent it to them and I was like, I'm giving you my 2 weeks. Your values don't align with mine. And it was a really stressful situation because I loved the work. I loved the work so much. I loved working in a multinational company. I loved doing employment law. I loved reading these contracts. I loved counseling former employees and current employees on the law. I loved working with outside counsel. I got to work with outside counsel from super prestigious law firms. And I loved it. And I had to leave. I even managed a team in another country and they loved me and I loved them. And it just broke my heart that I had to leave because this company didn't have good values.
yeah. So how did you find a company that aligned with your values after that?
Well, I am still looking to find
Okay.
a company that perfectly aligns with my values. But over time, each company that I've worked for, I've gotten closer and closer to an organization that truly aligns with my values. And not to say that the companies after that company were terrible, they just didn't fully align. And not because they were unethical or because they had immoral people working for them, none of that. They just didn't quite fit.
All right. So after leaving the multinational company, can you tell me about your next role?
Yeah, so my next role was with a startup and I was helping to build this business's business development, but also dealing with clients of the company while also being an in-house attorney for them while I was basically building the legal department with the CEO. And so I learned a lot about legal and business affairs and how they overlap within a startup company. And it was the first time that I had really been hands-on with a startup. It was different than the multinational firm, to be sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't have a lot of processes in place once you're in a startup. You kind of have to grow all of it from the ground up, right?
Exactly, that's exactly what we were doing. We were building policies and procedures, drafting employment documents, software license agreements, and then dealing with all of the business clients as well. And so I was helping to do business development. So it was a really fantastic realization of my business degree and my legal degree.
So cool. What type of industry was that startup in?
It was in management and business services. So it was a service provider company. and we're providing legal counsel, kind of, but it was more of a counseling on how to run your business effectively and efficiently. It was a fascinating company to be a part of.
Nice. So was it mostly B2B?
Yes, it was B2B for the most part, but there was some business to kind of direct consumer as well, because some of the individuals that we worked with, they were coming to us because they were just interested in general about business building, right? They didn't have a business per se, but they were interested in building their business. And so we got to counsel some of them, but it was mostly B2B.
And how long did you stay in that role?
Almost 2 years I was with them. And at the same time, I was of counsel for a company as well. And so, for the listeners who aren't extremely well versed on kind of how the in house life works, so I was an in house attorney for this startup, but I was able to do other work as well. And so, I was an of counsel attorney, which essentially means that I'm not working in a law firm. I am not the official attorney of a company or a firm, but I am someone that they consult with when they have questions, thoughts, they have extra work that they need to do. So I was also being of counsel for a company as well. So it was an interesting time to be sure.
Oh, nice. And what were you mostly doing in your of counsel role? What type of work?
I was working with small businesses for the most part and counseling this company's clients on how to start small businesses, what the corporate law was. I was doing employment law. I was doing a little bit of sports and entertainment. And sometimes I was also counseling individuals of the company as well. So, in the individual clients of the company. It was a really great complement to the work at the startup because I was kind of getting an entire, I don't know, a couple to 3 semesters worth of classes essentially as an attorney. And so I kind of saw it as an extended part of my law school experience and education.
Nice. What sort of skills did you develop there that you felt like were different from your other roles?
So when I was the of counsel for a company, I was kind of learning how to manage a client base, kind of how you learn how to manage it at a law firm, right? And so I'd spoken before about how I hadn't been at a traditional law firm, but this was kind of close to that because when you are juggling multiple clients, you're an in-house attorney for a company, but then you have of counsel roles for other clients, you're kind of managing your own caseload and you're able to understand how to organize. And you had to learn it kind of on the fly. And so for me, I learned how to organize multiple projects and multiple clients at the same time, which is something that I would have learned at a law firm if I had decided that was the route I wanted to take. But I learned the same exact skills in a different way.
So, what role did you move on to after that?
Then I went to a professional sports team and I was the in house attorney, sole and only in house attorney for a professional sports team. And I also managed all of the marketing and public relations and player relations as well.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of roles.
Was a whole lot. And it was a team that was extremely famous in the 80s and 90s, and then took a sabbatical, had some ownership issues, and was coming back. So it was, although it had been a very prestigious sports franchise for a really long time, it was almost like working at a startup because it was new ownership, new management, new players. We had to get new processes and policies put into place. And it was a new league as well. So it was an iteration of an old and established league. And so I was learning so much about mergers, acquisitions, franchise law, 501c3, employment, immigration, kind of everything. And the way that I got that job, because sports jobs are difficult to get, I got the job because I saw that someone was posting on LinkedIn an opportunity to have an internship with the team. And I thought to myself, I have these other jobs that I'm working, and I can just continue to work these other jobs and do an internship. So I'm just going to go and tell them that I want to apply for an internship. And I walked in, I know, I walked into the offices and went through the interview to be an intern, but told them I'd love to be a legal intern, but you guys have marketing positions. So I also have a degree in marketing, and I was on camera as an actress and a model for 15 years. So I also understand public relations and on camera and doing interviews and prepping people for interviews. I said, so I have a lot of unique skills that could really benefit your franchise. So you should hire me. And they said, okay, what do you want your role to be? And I told them that I wanted to be an attorney and a marketer for the team. And so my first position with them was contracts and marketing coordinator. And I was that for one full season. And then I got promoted to legal counsel and manager of marketing, which is a deceptive title because I was the general counsel and director of marketing and public relations at that team, right? So the title doesn't really explain everything that I was doing. And so it was a really great experience to learn because at that point, I had been licensed for 5 years. And so it's still pretty young as an attorney to have a general counsel position for a professional sports team. So my mentors all said, they're not paying you that much, but this is a wonderful opportunity for your resume. And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with the money. Eventually the money will come. If you're a hard worker, word will get out there. You'll eventually paid what you're worth, right? So for me, I really was excited about the opportunity to work in sports because that has always been what I wanted to do. My very first position out of law school was with a professional sports family, basically. And so this was kind of like full circle for me. It was really cool.
Nice. So what did you do when you ran across things that were not in your wheelhouse? I mean, being a general counsel when you are just 5 years out of law school, that is really rare. And I'm sure there's still a lot of things that you hadn't seen before. So did you have outside counsel that you consulted with, or did you talk to your mentors? Like how did you develop the skills necessary in order to serve all those roles?
Yes, so that's a fantastic question because young attorneys do get really stressed out that they might be ill-equipped to answer questions that they haven't studied or done an extreme amount of research on. And they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to commit malpractice because I don't know the answer right away and I have to do research. And oh my gosh, I don't know, and you start to just do this spiral, right? I knew that I had a tendency to maybe spiral. And so I kind of told myself at the very beginning, I'm like, listen, you understand that there are things you don't understand. So who can you go to? Who are the list of people you can go to when you have done research, but you still don't know? Right. And I would reach out to other general counsels of professional sports teams that I had networked with who became my mentors and friends. I would reach out to them. I would do research online. There are free classes online as well on different topics. And so you can get a general knowledge of certain things. And there was not a lot that I had to handle that I wasn't able to bone up on, reach out to a mentor, and then do it myself, right? So some of the immigration work, there was another attorney, an outside counsel that would do the immigration work because that's an area of law that you can't just like pretend to know what's going on, right?
Yeah, and if you don't do it well, things go horribly awry very quickly.
Exactly. So in those situations, right, tax, immigration, those types of things, if it is something that is very, very specific, you can give a general advice to, as an in-house attorney, to your team, right? And then you have to say, but if we want to file something or if we want to do X, Y, and Z, then we need to hire outside counsel and we need to have them do that. And so that's kind of what I did. And my relationships and network were so important during those times because there were times where I needed to get something drafted right away. I didn't want to draft it from scratch because I didn't have time. And so I would reach out to my mentors and say, hey, I need a employment handbook, just a very rough draft of one. Do you happen to have one laying around? And they'd say, oh yeah, here, let me email it to you after lunch. Right. And so then for me, my connections really helped me to be extremely successful at that role and to not feel like I had just been thrown into the ocean during a tsunami.
Yeah, I think a lot of young associates feel that way in general.
Yeah, definitely.
That's very common.
Yeah, my mentors helped me not to feel that way because I had been in positions previously where I did kind of feel that way because I didn't have my network or I didn't feel comfortable reaching out to people for help because I thought I had to know everything or they're going to take my license away from me. right? And
Yeah.
now I've come to know that as an attorney, if you're not asking other people for help and insight, and if you're not constantly learning, then you're probably committing malpractice, right? So you want to
Right.
make sure that you are reaching out, you are studying up, you are understanding what your blind spots are so that you know who to go to help you see in those blind spots.
What are some things that you wish you knew about the sports practice area before you dove into it?
Oh, wow. So I had done a lot of research on sports, on the area of sports. I understood kind of the generalized basics of what I was getting into, but no one can ever prepare you for sexual harassment in the sports world. Nobody can ever prepare you for people sending you inappropriate messages or berating you in the press box or lying about you to people because you didn't give them your number, right? So no one can prepare you for that. And unfortunately, that is rampant in the sports and entertainment world. It is getting a lot better. I mean, we just had the first female GM for MLB. That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and she's working for the Marlins. So there are lots of things that are changing, but at the end of the day, that's going to start at the top and then trickle down. It's not going to be something that now we have the first female GM in MLB history. Oh, great. Like there's no more sexism. There's no more.
If only it was that quick, right?
No, exactly. And so those are the things that I wish I had learned earlier. And it's not something that you can learn. You kind of have to experience it. I wish I had learned earlier that you're not the reason that people harass you, right? So the victim shouldn't feel like, oh, if I had only done X differently, maybe this wouldn't have happened. No, that's victim blaming and it's not going to be the victim's fault. So for me,
What was one of the most difficult scenarios or situations that you were put in that you were really, really caught off guard on?
yeah, so I was at a watch party to watch our team play, and I was working, and we had players there, and we had some like game day staff there. So people that are independent contractors, they're not actually working full time for the team. And one of the independent contractors for this team, who considers himself a very famous broadcaster, although I'd never heard of him, um, he told me that my outfit gave him a semi erection.
Wow.
And he said it out loud in front of people. And I was at work in a work outfit. It doesn't matter what I was wearing. I could have been naked. You don't say something like that. But I was in a work appropriate outfit. The fact that I have to even say that is unbelievable. But I was in a work appropriate outfit. And that's what he said to me. And if anyone's ever been sexually harassed at work, sometimes you think it's a joke, right? And you don't really.
Did anyone come to your defense?
No, no, never. No, no. And this was the first thing that this person had done. And then there were two other times where this person berated me, screamed at me in the press box. People were around, no one said anything. And then I was filming a show with the owner, the GM. This person was there, unfortunately. Everyone had known about, not everyone, but a lot of people had been told about his behavior toward me. And this guy lost it because I had changed the format. It's my job as marketing, PR, all of that. I was the producer of this segment, the director, and he was annoyed because I didn't let him know about the changes. He's an independent contractor that was hired to sit and just do what we told him to do. And he was angry, berated me, was yelling in front of all these people about how I never worked at USA Today. I had no idea what I was doing. I was completely inept and I was stupid. I had, just like crazy things. And no one did anything. No one
Oh my goodness.
cared. No one stopped him. The owner was just like, okay, you guys just need to stop talking. I'm like, well, he's yelling at me, so I don't know what you're doing. So for me, that was crazy because you think that you're the crazy one, right? You're like, what did I do to make this person so angry? Nothing. You were successful, and this person is intimidated by that, right? And that unfortunately happens in the professional sports world to women all the time. I mean, I have mentors who are females in the sports world, and they will get messages from guys from teams who see them and think that they're beautiful. And they're like, hey, I'd love to take you out on a date. And you're like, aren't you married with a child? Like, yeah. Like, oh, okay. Well, no, thank you. happens all the time. And that's something that is changing, but it's still really terrible. And what I would say people need to do who are in that space, especially men, they need to, when they see that stuff happening, they need to stop it and they need to say it's unacceptable and it's not okay. And you can't talk to her in that way and don't treat her that way. Right? That's crazy because that doesn't happen all the time. In my case, it never happened.
Yeah, so how did you handle it? How did you make him stop doing that behavior, and how were you able to, continue on professionally with your duties after that?
Yeah. So you can never really stop someone from doing those things. You can only put barriers to entry, right? So I made it very clear that that behavior, I wrote up an entire report on it, right? As an attorney, I was keeping track of everything already, right? I was keeping track of the complaints from other people about him and other complaints just in general about the atmosphere there. And I created a report. I gave it to my supervising boss and I said, listen, number one, don't feel safe in this environment if someone is able to do that. What if it had just been him and me? Would he have hit me? I don't know. He got absolutely irate. And so I said, the barrier to entry is that this person is not allowed to sit in the press box with me. This person needs to be sat at a different part of the arena. They need to understand that they're not going to engage with me. They're not supposed to speak with me. There's really no reason that this person should have any communication with me at all. And that's something that was just surprising to me, that no one had thought the first, the second, the third, or the fourth time that it might be a good idea for this person to just not have interactions with me because there was something going on with this person, right? And so I said, you need to have a conversation with this person, let them know. And in that regard, the person didn't come up to me anymore. They didn't sit in the areas where I was working, right? So that was wonderful, but they also didn't need to let this person go. It would have been an easy situation. It was an independent contractor in Texas. I mean, it's easy to just terminate the agreement, right? Find somebody else. It was the mentality that, well, we think this person is, been with the team for a long time and like their behavior's okay. Boys will be boys, that ridiculous phrase. And so for me, I just kept doing my job. A lot of, the players and the fans and even the other independent contractor game day staff had no idea about the situation because I kept it very quiet from people who didn't need to know, right? Because I wasn't trying to spread malicious gossip. I wasn't going to be a part of any of that. It was professional. It wasn't personal. You're unprofessional towards me. Therefore, we need to put barriers to entry for you to be unprofessional towards me. So you can't do it anymore, right?
Yeah. I know you had mentioned that they were sorely underpaying you for doing these 3 roles, but what is the actual earning potential for somebody who would be like the GC of a sports team?
Oh, it really depends. I mean, it depends on the tier level of the professional team. So you have, like the big 4, big 5 pro sports teams, pro sports leagues in North America. You have MLS, NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, right? MLS doesn't always hit up with those other teams, right? So if you're working for an NFL team, you could be making absolute bank in terms of in-house positions. So if you're working for like the Dallas Cowboys, you'd probably be making a ton more than if you are working for FC Dallas, right? The difference between those 2 leagues is substantial. However, it also depends upon whether that team is owned by like a billionaire family, right? Or is it owned by a conglomerate of people?
Yeah.
It really is so hard to even say what you could possibly be making because there's such a
Well, what's maybe some of the ranges that you've seen?
Oh, I've seen everything. I mean, I've seen from people who are working at professional leagues who aren't in those top ones making like, I don't know, 60,000, 100,000. And then I've seen people who are working at those top leagues that are like, banking 600, 700 with, $50,000 sign up. I mean, it's really like there is such a huge range. It's just really hard to say how much you would be making at any of those teams or leagues.
Do you ever see a lot of entry-level positions in those types of jobs, or do they typically hire people who are more experienced?
Entry level jobs for legal sports would be internships. Yeah, there's not a lot for entry level except at the internship level, but you can always go into a law firm, go to a sports law practice, or work in one of those areas like a litigation. You could be litigation and could do employment, work on transactional work, right? And maybe get 5, 6 years at a firm working toward being an in-house attorney. So, yeah, you would need to get, I would say, maybe 10 years worth of experience in order to be considered for like a legal counsel position within a team. I mean, recently I saw the USL, they were hiring an associate general counsel and they
Mhm.
wanted 6+ years, but they ended up getting someone that had more years of experience than that for the AD
Mhm.
role at the league. I mean, the USL is a phenomenal league, but they're not the highest level of professional soccer in North America. They are like
Mhm.
they have a second and third tier teams that are under their league. So that's not even MLS, right? And they wanted +6, so about 8 years worth of experience. So
Sure.
yeah, it's difficult, but it's possible. That's why if you see internships in sports, you take it. If you have the opportunity, like I did, to create your own position, reach for it. The worst they could say is no, but we'll keep your resume on file. And then you have people who you know in the sports world. It's all about who you know because a lot of the positions do not get posted, they just get filled.
Yeah. So, on that point of getting to know people in the industry, what sorts of organizations or industry events should students be going to in order to be getting to know people in the sports world?
So there's a ton. You can be part of the Sports Innovation Lab. That's a free group and they do hackathons and they have a Slack group that's 1,300 people in the sports world. And then you can go to Teamwork Online, which is where you can apply for positions. And then going on LinkedIn and seeing what these teams and leagues are doing. They're almost always having conferences, meetups online, especially now that we're in the pandemic, everything is virtual. So a lot of things are much easier to go to. So ESPNW just recently had a free conference. The 49ers had a conference recently that was free where you got to meet a ton of people. The MLS team in Seattle had one. I mean, there are so many, and you can find them on LinkedIn by following these professional sports teams and then reaching out to people at those teams. So when you're attending these Zooms or virtual meetups or conferences, it's not enough to just attend. You need to look at the list of people that attended and you need to reach out to them on something. And that's how I made a lot of my connections virtually, is by doing it that way. So,
Great.
yeah, that's the best way to go about it because you're not going to get to meet these people. And if you're just going to like regular networking events, but when you're doing everything online, that is the way to go. You're going to meet a lot of people and be able to go to a lot of conferences.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to these Zoom events or whatever where it's webinar style, you're not going to be able to interact with the speakers in really any other way than if you reach out to them afterwards. So I think it is important that you have to, make a name for yourself. Like you just can't go to these events and be a passive participant and expect people to know that you're there. You really have to kind of go the extra mile.
Exactly. And one area of sports that is really booming right now and has been for the past 5 years is esports. And so it's different than traditional sports. So, traditional sports, there is kind of a hierarchy. You have this many years at a firm, and then you might be able to go in house and work for a team or a league, right? Esports is burgeoning. And
It's the Wild West though right now.
it
So
is. It's the Wild West. They need a lot of help. And so it's possible that if you're a young attorney and you want to get into sports, esports might be the way to go. It might be the way that you network. You might be able to get some type of internship with an esports team. You might be able to be a consultant as an attorney consultant for an esports team or an esports league or an esports player. And then you can have something that's sports related on your resume. It's very important to have sports related things on your resume, even if it's just 6 months I interned with X, or for 3 months I was a consultant for Y. When someone sees that that you're kind of like in the know about sports, they're much more willing to at least talk to you about positions at their organizations.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of these nuggets of wisdom. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
I just want to share that everything's going to be okay. Because you didn't get the position you wanted, or maybe you didn't get that interview, or you didn't land the job that you thought you were perfect for. It's okay. I am living proof that you can still be successful in an industry that people tell you is too hard to crack. And you just have to keep going forward, maybe taking those positions that aren't 100% matched up with what you want to do, but you can see a path forward with those areas of law, and taking those internships and making sure that you put yourself out there. That is the most important thing. I wouldn't have gotten half of the jobs that I have gotten, or half of the opportunities that I have gotten, if I was scared to hear no.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing all of these very personal stories with our listeners. I think it's just so helpful for them to be able to hear how real humans actually figured out all this career stuff,
Definitely. So. I'm happy to be on, and I just want to thank you so much for letting me share my story.
This episode is sponsored by Sherry Bellett's Communications.
Hi everyone, this is Sherry Bellett's from Sherry Bellett's Communications. Do you have a case which needs a liability or damages evaluation for mediation or trial? I help lawyers use psychology to achieve favorable litigation outcomes with my strategic focus groups, mock trials, and jury research services. If you would like to learn more, please email me, sherry@sherrybellets.com. Thank you.
All right, everyone. That's it for today. Thank you to our guest speaker, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Law Lives Project. If you're a prospective law student that's interested in speaking with attorneys one-on-one, check out leguplegal.com. Legup Legal is an online mentoring platform that connects prospective law students with attorney mentors. Sign up for a membership today to learn more about the practice of law and see if it's a good fit for you. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes or any other platform that you're listening on. If you have any questions or comments about anything you heard on the podcast, or if you have ideas for guest speakers, please contact me by emailing me and my team at info@leguplegal.com. Thanks again, and don't forget to tune in next week.